Welcome, and this is Millennial Anti-Terrorizers, and we are back with our new years. Today, we're going to talk about Iraq and Afghanistan and our tours there. So, since we kind of talked about what we did as far as having our R&R while deployed, let's talk about the missions at hand and what we've done.
So I joined in 2000. So in 2001, 9/11 happened, obviously. And my unit was training for the Marine Expeditionary Unit, Special Operations Capable. We were actually going through the SOC wall and 9/11 happened. So they deployed our unit early and we relieved 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, which is the battalion that took, I think it was Kandahar Air Base when we did initially go into Afghanistan. Uh, we never went into Afghanistan. Operation Anaconda happened. So elements from RMU did give support to the Army during Operation Anaconda, but mainly on that deployment. That was my first deployment. My second deployment was a combat deployment to the Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003. And with that, my battalion was assigned to 1st Regimental Combat Team, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. And with our element, we did the hard right hook towards Al Qut. And those were my first two deployments and my only deployments, one combat, one non-combat.
Um,
Yay. Yes,
when I
everybody.
deployed, it was 2011, and I deployed under made up unit. Like they created a unit called CLB-X, Combat Logistics Battalion X-Ray or 10, and it was just we were all supposed to go to Bahrain, and that ended up getting canceled because of all the protesting that was going on in Africa back in 2011. So they needed a small unit to fill up, and whatever was going on at the time, they just needed to fill up this little section. Like 30, only 30 of us went to Afghanistan from CLB 10, and it was all MOS specific, mostly um, motor T and in mechanics and supply guys, some maintenance guys like on generators and those fridge Connex boxes and stuff like that. And the 30 of us went for 3 months, and about the majority of them went to out to one of the fobs. I forgot which one it was, um, out in the Sanjin Valley, but only four of us stayed back on Kandahar,
Okay.
and it was just three. It was 3 months long, there and back.
Okay. I know for me, I did three tours. All of them were the OIF, which is the Operation Iraqi Freedom. So this is already after 9/11. I had some broken service. So going back in 2004, I eventually deployed in 2005, 2007, and 2009. My missions were always different, but each time we went to the same location. So my unit at the time um, was MWSS 271 from Cherry Point, but we always went to Al Asad, Iraq, is where our I guess camp is what we would call it. And then we kind of just stayed up on the top of the flight line.
So for the first time on the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit, we float around the ocean, and as a platoon, we were assigned to Charlie Company, which was the Helo Company on the Baham Richard, and we were basically doing helo assaults, things like that. But mainly, our objective was training with our allies and just waiting for something to happen. Like I said, we didn't go into Operation Anaconda. On our second deployment, the platoon's mission there was I was in a combined anti-armor team, a cat platoon, and basically that's tow missiles and heavy machine guns. And we are the anti-armor element for an infantry battalion or battalion landing team. And we do have javelins, 6 javelin gunner teams in the battalion, but the tow missiles were the bread and butter on knocking out armor or heavy fortified positions because they're cheaper and we have more of them actually. We have 8 tow missiles versus 6 javelin gunners. Uh, that was my platoon's mission on the second time. And our job was to be with the battalion all the way to push to Al Qut, did the feint to Al Qut, then wrapped around over to Baghdad. We took Baghdad. Once we took Baghdad, then we went to a place called Ahila. Now, people might not know about Ahila, but they might have heard of another town called Babylon. And Babylon is or Ahila is the major metropolis outside of Babylon. And there we did our restructuring and occupation duties of Iraq, rebuilt the infrastructure, did a lot of patrolling, a lot of convoys, a lot of escort duty, things like that. And that's pretty much what my platoon's mission was.
Okay.
Like I said, our unit was designated under CLB 10, and we were all made up from various units of the regiment of our parent commands. And originally, what we were supposed to be doing was um, starting up whatever they were doing in Bahrain. But what we ended up doing in Afghanistan was, um, I guess they started this up back in like 2011, where um, you know how like when they send units over and they have bodies over, everything is on the how long have you been there, and now we got to start adding to the those numbers.
Okay.
And so what they started doing in 2011 was, well, why don't we send these units in smaller groups and only have them there for X amount of time. So now you can't go, hey, dude, there's 2,000, example wise, let's just say, there's X amount of troops that are here. You send 30 over and they're only there for 3 months and they come back. Oh, it's like those guys weren't even there. But you send these 400 or 500 troops over and they're there for 4, 5, 6 months. Okay, now we had 100,000 troops. Now we've got 100,000, 500, 600 troops here. But you do these 30 man group at a times for 3 months at a time. Oh, that 100,000 number just stays at 100,000 number. They can have 500 troops go over, but it's 30 from this unit, 30 in this unit, 30 in this unit, and they're only going to be here for 3 months. They'll be here for 3 months after that, and so on and so forth. Then it's just like those numbers are never there. And all we were doing basically was just adding up numbers to, it's kind of like being a replacement in a sense, if that makes sense to you guys, because like we were just there just to kind of help out the unit that had the least number of bodies there. And
Like a
since we had
fill-in.
since the 4 of us that stayed behind was because we had one of our sergeants was a female, and she had to stay. This was back where they would keep the females on the main base of Kandahar, and they couldn't go out and do patrols and go out and do at the fobs unless they were part of the NP company. And so 4 of us stayed back to like kind of relay supplies, or basically what they would be doing is the guys that went out would help and assist everybody at the fob that they were at, and recover vehicles and get them sent back to Kandahar, where we would help place them where they needed to go to get repaired. These 4 that are fucked up can turn into 1. So we'd take them down to the maintenance battalion on Kandahar. And then on top of that, we'd run out and go resupply and get them on whatever they needed where they were at.
Okay. For us, so when I said Marine, it's a support squadron. So we were supporting other units or just supplying stuff when we were always out in Iraq. So with my first tour, I was attached to the Motor T platoon. So I was actually doing the convoys, going out there. And because it was 2005, just right after the invasion, our job was really just to kind of clean up the aftermath of like when you see these dead aircraft on the random side of the road or any explosions from before then. We're just cleaning up the areas, pretty much what was going on. But then at the same time, we were also doing stuff on the camp itself, which is what we call out inside the wire versus outside the wire. It's just pretty much the perimeter of the base. So we were always helping out with the flight line, or if it's our combat engineer guys, they were doing something down with other units, helping them out. So we had to use our trucks to help move stuff around for them. That's kind of like the mission at hand in 2005. Whereas 2007, I kind of shifted over into fuels prior to that. So now I'm working on the actual flight line, working with fuel trucks, filling the aircraft, helping their mission out and stuff like that, which was actually pretty exciting for me. I really enjoyed that a lot, getting to know what each unit was kind of what their missions were and how we were help supporting them in their flights and whatnot. And then again, I was fuels again in 2009, but the mission kind of shifted. We were still doing kind of the similar stuff with fueling the aircraft, but also at the same time, now we're transitioning out of Iraq, coming back home. So we were trying to clean up the gear and send some of our stuff back home, not to our personal unit, but whoever takes the equipment and has to send it back to the state size. It's pretty much what we were doing. But my last two tours weren't too hectic, whereas compared to like say like my first tour in 2005, that's when a lot was actually happening. So I say that was the most, I think I had fun, but I think it was scary at the same time because we were getting motored around. We were getting IEDs, like everything was happening. I mean, it was scary in the moment, but the thrill of it was really kind of the rush I was getting because it's like, wow, we're actual heroes and stuff. So that's kind of where I was getting a little bit of a tickle every time we would talk about our stories going back home or something like that. Whereas fuels, who cares if we filled an aircraft? It's kind of boring.
Um, so the first deployment, I was a little nervous. 9/11 just happened. We were sending different units to Afghanistan from all branches of the service. We did our training in Hawaii, Singapore. Then we went to Kenya, and some of the units went to Yemen, actually, believe it or not. I know that's a big hot topic nowadays, and trained with their military. But we didn't go into Operation Anaconda. That was mainly the artillery and the Harriers and so on and so forth. But mentally, it prepared me for going into combat for that 8 months that I was deployed. On my second deployment, I was a senior Marine, so therefore I have to keep it calm and collective more around the younger Marines. So there's more relied upon me, and I'm older at this point where I'm 22. So, you know, I was a little bit more wiser than my first deployment. And I was lucky in that aspect. Another aspect that I was lucky in was everybody in my battalion, except for a select few staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants that have been in a combat deployment before in the 90s. This is pretty much all of us losing our cherries on the same day with the 3 or 4 different firefights we went through on the first day that the battalion saw combat after we pushed north of Al Nazariya. Uh, so my expectations were pretty high my first deployment. On my second deployment, the expectations that I was supposed to perceive upon my junior Marines was even higher.
Okay. What about you, Alex?
Oh, my time there, the only thing we had happening to us was when we were out on our convoy route to supply the rest of the fobs up, and you're just coming across IEDs left and right on a daily basis. We had route clearance with us, and it was the longest freaking, you think like driving from the desert to LA or from like out here in the sticks to Denver is quick and back, but it's like, a trip like that out there took us nearly 2 weeks to just go around and stop off at the fobs that were in the vicinity of the route first, go, almost like doing like a loop circle because of the route clearance and the IEDs. Like every time they go up 20 fucking yards and hit something, they'd have to back up, 30 yards and go a whole new direction. So that hurry up and wait. You ain't got nothing. Y'all have not heard of the hurry up and wait like I've dealt with on this one, because it was a straight. You drive you just all that just for maybe moving up 10 feet, and then having to stop and wait another 4 or 5 out, X amount of time for route clearance to do what they're doing. So it was slow moving, but I mean, there was IEDs left and right, left and right. We once the convoy started actually pulling and pushing and moving, you look by and see the 2, 3 vehicles that got hit, or the one that I forget what they're called, and I've only seen them a few hand of times, but we had those. The vehicle that is designed and built to really drive over and get destroyed by the IED first, and then it breaks apart. The individual sits in the cab. You know what I'm talking about, Beth? And the and
Yes, I
the
do.
the cab
I forgot
just
to call.
bolts up.
Yeah, I don't
What's that
remember what
called
they're called
again?
though. I don't remember. I'll have to look it up.
Buffalo,
Yeah,
a buffalo.
yeah, I believe so. Because
Buffalo
they're
was
brand.
one of them, but they had other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, we had
Because they were
tires in
starting to
front of the
use
seven
those.
tons that would drive over the IEDs first, so that way those would explode, so we could keep pushing forward versus the truck getting hit. I know we had those, which I'll talk
Yeah, we
about.
had we had mine rollers on all of our 7 tons, but we had a few of those buffaloes leading the convoy and spread it, in between so they could swap out. And we drive by and I'd see one blown apart. Yep, dude standing there looking at it like, yeah, it did its job. And I'm like, all right, man, that's what that looks like. Because we had heard of them, we've been introduced to them. I remember when I was in training at Fort Linwood in Missouri, but we didn't have the actual vehicle there. They just showed us some pictures and said this is what it's going to look like. This is what the job design is supposed to be. They briefed on it real quickly, and at that point, I had never seen one anywhere, even on garrison, until I got to Afghanistan, and it was part of our convoy, and I saw it on the side, smashed up.
Okay.
But it was just that, and then having to really having to pay attention and look out for the locals, because we had civilians in our convoy as well, like a lot of civilian water trucks and those little box trucks that they use to drive in and all. Um, we had like about 80 vehicles in this convoy, 80 plus, like 85 or something like that, and about half of them were civilian vehicles as well. So we had civi populace that we had to look out for while we were rolling in the convoy, as well as the civilian populace that were just out and about, mingling, doing their daily lively deals. And I was very lucky and fortunate to be one of those troops that can come home and say, hey, all of our guys were good. Everybody came home. I didn't have to deal with a whole lot other than explosions and
Yeah.
being in that convoy. Last night we were there, we had a mortar siren incoming, so we everybody had to bug out to those concrete squared structures for the bunkers they had, like every 20 feet, or no, not 20 feet, like every like yeah, like about every 20 yards they were out from everywhere everybody stayed, and about that far apart from each other. Everybody had to just get to the nearest one and hold tight until we got the all clear.
Okay. For me, I kind of might stick to my first tour because that's when a lot more was happening. Whereas my other two, I was just like, I didn't think much of it. That's where a lot more was happening. Again, I was flooded with emotions when I first got there because we didn't right away go into our unit with doing a lot of missions because there's a different unit that was still kind of there and we were kind of transitioning. So we ended up having to actually our first month do what we call towers, which was all around the perimeter of the base. And these towers, only two people could stand in them because it's enough room. It's barely like a 4x4 little room. We would just stand in to kind of watch out for snipers or any activity going on outside the wire. In our first month, this is when the fuel farm ended up getting blown up by sorry, not an ID, an RPG. We got hit 3 times that day. The fuel farm blew up. I know we got hit on the flight line, they said, and then somewhere else it hit just randomly offside the base. But that's when we actually it hit CNN when our fuel farm blew up for the whole entire base, not just our unit. I mean, this fueled everybody that was supporting this whole entire operation with on this on this camp. So I remember standing towers that day and it being so hot from the flames. Yet I was literally probably less than half a mile away, but you could just feel the heat coming from that. But thankfully, nobody got hurt that day. But just hearing what was going on and watching all the firefighters fight that was probably more intense than I think a wildfire that I've seen here in the States because it's fuel, jet fuel, as if that. That was just one of my stories. And as things are kind of going on, once we eventually got into our positions for what we were supposed to do, this is when we actually started doing more of our convoys, and they did switch up a lot. So our convoys wasn't always going to supply somebody. Sometimes it was working with EOD to go check for like landmines and IEDs and stuff like that. So Alex, I feel you about that hurry up and wait. Like how long we would be out there almost like 22 days, I think was our longest time. We had to stop doing that because of we almost got stuck one time. But yeah, because just these short durations to making sure we're not hitting things, and then we had to clear the road, and then we get to go just barely maybe a couple feet down the road, and then we catch something else. But a story I remember the most was actually being blown up in a Humvee myself because of an IED, but I don't think it was so extreme because my Humvee didn't get destroyed. I was still able to drive it somehow. I mean, it did eventually die once we got to camp, but and it was done. But it was still able to keep pushing without having to stop and get a tow bar out or something. But I think that was my scariest experience out of all the car accidents I've been in. I think in my entire life, Jesus, that was my scariest moment because I couldn't stop thinking about my family. I'm like, am I going to go home? Wasn't really thinking about anybody else, but never got into any firefights. So but that was pretty much what we were dealing with between like Al Assad. We were always in Baghdad, Ramadi, or Fallujah. We were traveling all around the place.
The 13th Mew was pretty fun. When we left out of San Diego. We got on ship. Took a day or two to get everything ready to go, and we had a chance to say goodbye to our families. And then when we came back, we took the helos back to Horno, so a direct flight to our camp Horno at Camp Pendleton, and we land there on the LZ and rucked it to the barracks, and we kind of just like waited around. Then we had to build our own damn furniture in the new the new furniture in the barracks because we got issued new furniture. So yeah, put your shit together, right? And that was some parent came by with some beer and some pizza, so that was nice. Um, my second deployment with combat, which was they gave us a month leave and we got on the ships. We drove our Humvees down to camp or to San Diego again and loaded up. We stopped off in Guam when one of the ships broke down, and then we had to go through a hurricane, or I'm sorry, a typhoon, to catch up to the fleet. That was fun. And then eventually we disembarked with LCAX, which was the hovercrafts, into Kuwait, staged south of the border in Iraq there. We stayed there for about 3 weeks, almost a month, before George Bush gave uh, Saddam Hussein his 48-hour notice. Once he gave him his 48-hour notice, we then moved up towards the line and staged in a defensive posture with coffin graves and cami netting out over the vehicles. And then the next day, that's when they started shooting scuds at us. On my way back, I had been wounded. So I went from the 28th Cash Unit to Baghdad, took an Australian C-130 to Kuwait. I was in Kuwait for 2 days waiting for my blood pressure to get better. And then I went to the medical facility outside of Ramstein in Germany. And I stayed there for about 5 or 6 days. And then I took or a transport. So it had like litters in the middle, and on the outer skin were the little bucket seats for the civilians. And these were all the dependents. And so here are all the wounded. I mean, dozens of us. It was 2 or 3 high on the stretchers, double line, going all the way the length of the plane. And you have all these dependents with their children, and we're all wounded. I mean, like there must have been like 50 of us wounded on the plane. And so so we landed at but not Bethesda. We landed at Andrews, I think it is, outside of DC. And we got off there, and Andrews, yeah, not Edwards. And then I got over to Bethesda Naval Hospital, and I spent about a month at Bethesda Naval Hospital, and then I spent about 2 weeks at the Pendleton Hospital before I was finally released to go home for convalescent leave.
All right, Alex.
When we left, it was, we just took a bus to March Air Force Base, but it was like a charter plane that flew us to Maryland.
Okay.
I forgot what airport, but we flew into Maryland, and from there flew out to Germany. Germany airport, we were only supposed to be. I forgot how long we were there for. It was like an hour or two layover, but they told we couldn't like leave the terminal. Like we were only supposed to stay at the designated terminal, that when you get off the plane, you go into that one terminal. You just stay right there. They let us kind of peruse around, and there was a gift shop, and just to look inside, just to see what kind of stuff they would have different than what we would be doing at an airport or something like that. And then we went from there to Kazakhstan, Manas, and
Okay.
waited for 2 weeks. No, it was about a week, give or take, because then they give you like all those extra safety briefings. You're not supposed to be doing this. Don't do this. Um, from there, we got on that C-130 that took us to the next country over to Afghanistan, Kandahar. It was just I want to say that was like a almost 2 hour flight, maybe give or take. I mean, we were, up and heading up on that incline for a good 20 minutes or so, leveled out for like maybe half an hour, give or take, and then, and again at a 20 minutes, half an hour, like just straight going down. But on the way back, it was basically the same thing. It was the same thing reversed,
Mm.
except for a little bit less time at Kazakhstan than going in. I think so, because I think we were only there for like 3 days heading back versus being there for almost a week. And the only difference was when we were hitting up that airport in Germany, that they did allow us to drink to, they got, Jack and Coke. It's already mixed right there in the bottle, and some of the devil dogs partook on that too much than we were supposed to, and they ended up bitching at everybody about it. I was the only one that brought up and went, you know what, fair is fair and all that, but me and these 10 other guys had no part in that, and nobody drank here. in this terminal.
You know what? Give me that thing. I'll do one. We gonna do one. We gonna do one. We gonna do one. Do you, baby? Oh! That's a talented man right there. That's what I'm talking. Do it up again. It's so good. Once it hits your lips, it's so good.
Okay.
You know, once he got the word of that and then looked at it and went, all right, fair is fair, dude. I'm not going to punish everybody for, because we were just chilling, charging up our whatever electronic we had, and just, we finally was able to get some Wi-Fi. Let's get on and try to talk to someone or fuck around. I'll drink when I get home, and because I knew some bullshit like that was going to happen.
We're good, streaky. Yes.
So I didn't have to partake in that.
Since we were in North Carolina, going there, we were always going to JFK, the New York airport, is where we would fly to, because this is where they would kind of stop to get fuel before heading to Ireland, which was our next stop. And then from Ireland, going there, we weren't allowed to kind of like do much. So if we did have to get off the airplane when they were fueling, we had to just stay within the area. We didn't get to go walk around or anything, especially at JFK. We had to stay within that terminal because it was shut off just specifically for us. But going to Ireland, we were still around the people, but they didn't allow us to go like shop or anything. And then by the time we were done fueling up in Ireland, that's when we were there in Kuwait. We were there for like a couple of hours to a day, depending on like when they were getting our flight ready. And then from Kuwait, that's when we would fly into Al Assad. So same thing coming back, but let me talk about going forward. I remember getting off the airplane, and this is when, again, this is still when the invasion was just kind of coming down. And I remember the white body bags everywhere. I can't remember they called the name of the aircraft, like a Pelican. I forgot. They call it some type of bird name, and that represented like this is the aircraft that would take the bodies back home, so that way families and stuff they could take care of them. And oh my God, like you could smell them. It was so bad. But anyways, I don't want to get into that story. I just want to say I remember that specifically getting off the aircraft and just seeing all these white body bags across the flight line because they're getting ready to ship them home. But anyways, that was my traumatic event. But going back to the States, it was the same pathway, kind of like Alex said, we kind of just take the same direction. But I remember there's one time we didn't stop off in Newark. We ended up going to Canada for some reason into this like itty bitty tiny airport. And I just remember that. But going back to Ireland, they did let eventually us kind of walk around the actual airport. And by then, that's when you're allowed to buy things. So I remember people buying absinthe because it's illegal in the States. So people are trying to sneak it back. And that's your only chance. I never did it. But I was always curious because I hear the stories about the hallucination and some kind of green fairy. And I was like, no, thanks. Not interested in that. But I remember some of the guys, they only limited us, like anybody to drink only 2 drinks because they didn't want anybody being belligerent on the airplane back home and or thrown up. Because I could see that happening between Marines. We are stupid and we'll do anything for attention. Well, that kind of wraps it up. I really enjoy hearing your guys' stories, and I hope you all hear our stories and like really resonate with them or just really enjoy hearing what we got to say. But again, this is Millennial Anti-Terrorizers, and Happy New Year's.